Environment Excellence Panel. I'm Judy Leggett, the portfolio holder for Environment Excellence. Can I just remind you that this meeting is being streamed on YouTube and is being recorded. And I think you've all just had a reminder of that. Can I ask you to mute yourself if you're not speaking? And can I ask you to put your name in the chat appropriately if you wish to speak? And then we can make sure everybody's taken in order. I think that's all. So we'll move to agenda item 1, declarations of interest and calling the roll. James, over to you for this.
Yes. Councillor Britcher, can you confirm that you're here and if you have any interest?
I am here and I have no interest to declare.
Right. Councillor Crotch.
Present and no declarations.
Councillor Fisher.
Present and no declarations. Thank you.
Councillor Kelly.
Present, no declarations of interest.
Councillor Lawrence.
Present and no declarations.
Councillor J Leggett.
Present and no declarations.
Councillor Nurden.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Prutton.
Present, no declarations.
And Councillor Ward.
Present, no declarations.
And we have some other members who are present. Councillor Catchpole, do you have any interest to declare?
Present but no interest, thank you.
Right. And Councillor Ken Leggett. Councillor Ken Leggett, do you have any interest at all?
Apologies. Yes, present, no interest.
Councillor Mancini Boyle.
No declarations, thank you.
And that's complete of all the attendees.
Thank you very much. James, any apologies for absence?
We have an apology from Councillor Cook.
Right, thank you. Moving on to item 3, the minutes of our last meeting. These were there are further minutes, which of course will be taken when we exclude the public. Right, any questions of accuracy on page 1 and page 2? No? Right, do you all, you're all happy with the minutes then? Will you please put your hand up? Is that acceptable, James? If they
That appears to be unanimous, yes.
Yes, right, thank you very much for that. Right, now we'll move on to item 4, which is recycling. And I will ask Michaela to present the report.
Hello. So
right, welcome, Michaela.
Thank you. So I am, for those of you that don't know me, I'm one of the recycling and partnership officers for Broadland and South Norfolk. So hopefully you've all got a copy of the report in front of you, and I'll just do a quick run through of the report. Well, maybe quick, it's quite a long report, and then answer any questions that you might have afterwards, and hopefully Victoria and Nagin can help as well if you've got any questions. So a brief summary is that Broadland Council has articulated that they have a clear ambition to achieve 60% recycling rate by 2025. And based on our current rate, which was actually last year for 2019-20, that's an increase of around 10 to 11%. This report is presenting high-level proposals only, and then the decisions of the panel after this meeting will then be taken forward, and that will help us as a team to develop more detailed project proposals that we can then present to you again. So for the background, Broadland's recycling rate in 2019-2020 was 49.6%, which does make us the top authority in Broadland based on recycling rates. When you look at it broken down, it is largely, when you look at Broadland, we have a large amount of organic waste material that's collected. And so that has made us #1. Whereas if you look at the dry proportion, South Norfolk is actually #1, sometimes in Norwich. But that further breakdown of that is actually within the Appendix 1. And the national context, we've got the main points out of there's several national and local strategies. And to be honest, a lot of the national ones often kind of say the same thing. But so in summary, the government, there's a 65% recycling rate that they would like to be achieved by 2035. And the council's ambition to achieve the 60% by 2025 is therefore clearly in line with the government's aspiration. And it's also in line with the government's 2018 resources waste strategy and the 25-year environment plan. We've also got consultations that are likely to come forward next year, and those will be for the introduction of food waste to all households, and post the consultation, the implementation of this could be from 2023. And at the same time, this is also the introduction of household non-chargeable garden waste to all householders that have a garden. And again, that will be further consultations next year with expected implementation again for 2023. We've also, there's possibly the separation of materials at the curbside to increase quality, because there is government's aspiration to improve the quality of the recycling that's actually collected at the moment. We've also, as a council in September 2019, signed up to the Courtauld Agreement. And within that agreement, there is a voluntary one, and it is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 20% reduction per household, and that's for the food and drink consumed, and also for the same reduction for the food and drink waste horizons. And linked to that, there's actually RAP's got which is the Waste Resource Action Programme. They've actually got their own report, and which linked to the Courtauld Agreement for, again, a desired aspiration for all householders to have food waste collections. So that's kind of the summary of everything that's going on nationally and locally. And then obviously for the Broadland environment strategy, there is the commitment to get the 60%. So for the current position for the recycling team, just to let you know, we currently consist of 2 permanent part-time recycling and partnership officers, and also 1 full-time recycling and partnership officer, which is a temporary post in place until March 2021. And these roles cover both districts, which covers approximately 120,000 households. So as you can see, we are quite a small team. And within the structure as well, there is also an apprenticeship role, but that role at the moment is vacant. Our work largely is on contamination and increase in recycling, but alongside that, a significant proportion is actually on waste data, and that is a mandatory, and it does take up a very large proportion of our time, potentially up to about 40%. And that includes waste data flow and other things that go to the government. So I'm sure you all know the general services that Broadland District Council provide are a fortnightly dry recyclable collection, fortnightly rubbish collections, a garden waste service, weekly food waste to about 28,000 properties, textile banks, and a chargeable bulky waste service. And again, more information of that is actually contained within the appendix, and that's Appendix 3. Page has gone funny, sorry. So for the national best practice, we have looked at several councils, and we have actually contacted some of them as well to try and see why they're achieving the highest recycling rates. There are more details in Appendix 4 on what we've actually found out. But in general, the national trend, the trends for those councils are that they have smaller residual bins, they have food waste collections across the whole council areas, They have garden waste collections across the whole council area, and they also collect additional materials such as electrical items, so that'll be the small electrical items at the curbside, textiles and batteries. So the main part of this report is now the proposals that we're putting forward. These are just high-level proposals. They're not in detail at this stage, so we have provided some costs and some information, but more detail will come later, and that will be when the panel decides what you actually want us to take forward and work on. Again, consideration needs to be given to the size of our team and what proposals are taken forward. And the adoption of these proposals will obviously have some significant impact, and that's financially, and it will place financial burdens depending on which proposals you want to take forward. But it is worth considering, as I said earlier, with the national context, that some of the financial implications might come anyway, and that will be through the consultations that the government puts forward next year connected to the food and garden waste. So I'll go through the options. These are listed largely a bit in order. So the first ones relating to food waste and garden waste and reduce and residual waste are the ones that are likely to show the biggest increase in recycling. So those are the ones that are likely to be the ones that will enable the 60% to be most possible. So for the food waste, we've currently got just over 28,000 householders on the food waste. We have the option whether to expand this to the remaining 30,000 householders in the district. We've got some, as I said, we've got some high-level costs from our finance team. And if you want any information on the finances, we can always go back to them and get some more. But they're saying about capital, it's around 103, no, that would be cheaper, sorry, 100,000, and that would cost around 567,000 per year. And that would be an increase of about £103,000 per year if we wanted to expand the food waste across to the whole district. Another option that we could do is to just promote the food digesters to households. So the food waste digesters are different to the composters in that these you can put cooked waste in and the basket is more under the ground, so you won't get as many rodents. We have got a Norfolk partnership, which is largely run by Norfolk County Council, where we do promote things to residents. But on that, the food digesters aren't actually subsidised, and the cheapest one on that is £99.99. That would help to increase food waste, food waste not going into the residual bins. But again, you can't guarantee the residents will do it. And we wouldn't be able to claim any tonnages for it. We couldn't claim recycling credits for it. But it would, as I said, contribute potentially to waste minimisation and getting the residual waste tonnages down. We could also do a communication campaign on the food waste service and potentially link that to behaviour change and try and find out the barriers as well, why residents aren't using the service. Research has shown, especially during lockdown, that householders have become more conscious of their food waste, and they are trying to kind of portion size, do their shopping lists, and this is the time when they are more conscious and you're more likely to get people on board. WRAP, so the Waste Resource Action Programme, is actually launching its Waste and Food, its Out of Date campaign. And that is going to be launched, I think it's next week. And that is linking to food waste and greenhouse gas emissions and building upon the behaviour that they've learned from the lockdown and how people are changing. For the food waste as well, we could link it to set out and participation rates. So we estimate that just over 70% of householders that are currently on the food waste service actually use their bins. So about 30% of the people could have it that have got it, don't use the service. So we could find out what barriers they are, whether they think it's dirty, smelly, they don't produce food waste. And this way, if we could use that, we can maximise the efficiency of the scheme and then capture more tonnage that way, which will then link to the capturing of more recycling credits. And that again would be without additional expenditure, because that would just be more of a communication campaign. The other proposal we have is linked to garden waste. So the first one, again, is coming through the high performers, that they have garden waste to a lot of the, well, across the district to the householders. And that would be the possibility of introducing free garden waste to all householders. Now that again is something that the government might be consulting on next year anyway. And if that's taken forward, it could be something that we have to implement anyway in 2023. So the free garden waste to all would increase the accessibility, it would increase our garden waste tonnage, and it would increase our recycling credits. And as I've mentioned at the beginning, a large proportion of our recycling rate is actually from the organic material. So it shows how significant that proportion is. From our finance team, this expected is to cost a net spend of around £671,000, which will be an increase of about £265,000 for what it is now. And in addition, foregone revenue of about 1.5 million. So that is obviously, we won't be getting the cost from the people subscribing to the scheme. From the top authorities, some have introduced free garden waste, but they have decided that this isn't actually sustainable. So some of them are now going back to charging. I think they're now starting it, so we don't actually know how effective it's been when they've gone back to charging. It's something they're currently doing, so we can obviously get in contact with them once they're further down the road. The other thing we can do for garden waste is promotion of the scheme further, and that can include the sharing of garden waste bins as well, and just letting people know about the service more. In last year, we did a joint leaflet with Norfolk County Council, and we sent a leaflet to all householders in Broadland. And that leaflet had composting on one side and garden waste on the other side. And this leaflet was paid by Norfolk County Council, so I don't know whether it's something that they would pay for again. And this resulted in an increase of brown bin customers with 500 new subscribers for the month that the leaflet went out. And that was in comparison to 268 the month before. Another option we could have for garden waste as well is the promotion of home composting. And again, this was a part of the leaflet that we did with Norfolk County Council last year, with the composting on one side. And that resulted in 260 compost sales in that month, compared to only 41 compost sales the previous month. So the leaflet did have a large impact on increasing that. And in total, through the home composting scheme in Norfolk, only in Broadland, 484 residents purchased bins through that scheme, which shows how much impact the actual leaflet had, because there was 260 in 1 month. Again, similar to the food waste, if we promoted it with the food digesters, we wouldn't be able to claim any of the tonnage data for home composting, and we also wouldn't be able to claim any recycling credits from Norfolk County Council. Also, potentially, the residual waste reduction for garden waste, for the garden waste may be lower, because hopefully residents shouldn't be putting garden waste within any of their bins anyway. So that might not have the same amount of impact on the residual waste. The other two options we've got are connected to reducing the residual waste. And in the 2019 progress report on the 25-year environmental plan, it was actually recognised that the waste minimisation indicators were very stable. So they weren't really showing any positive or negative trends. And it will be key to, if we want to increase the recycling rate, to actually then minimise the residual waste at the same time, because then obviously the recycling and composting proportion will be larger. And so the two options we have presented are smaller residual bins. So that would be changing all of the 240 litre bins to 180 litre bins. This would help to get recycling out of the residual waste bin as well, because one thing we've noticed when we monitor and when we go out in the district is actually there is a lot of recycling in our waste bins. And if we could capture that recycling at the same time, that would help to increase the recycling. To change all of the bins, we've got a capital cost of around £938,000 with an additional £187,000 for the delivery of the bins. Sorry, my voice is going. We can look into the costs a lot more, and we can also, one thing we haven't considered is the disposal and the recycling of the bins as yet. So that is something that we will need to take forward if this is one of the options to take forward, and we'll look at that in the more detailed plan on how we'll do it. There is another thing to consider, that in the 2019 consultation on consistency in recycling collections that the government is putting forward as well, there is an aspiration for all bins to be a standardised colour. So if this is something we wanted to consider, this could be a consideration for the bin colours as well on the bins. The other option is to introduce 3 weekly collections of residual waste. So that would be going for our fortnightly collection to 3 weekly. This would obviously be a cost saving, and it would decrease the residual waste volume, which again would have the same impact, you'd hope, of getting the recycling out of the residual bin that's not being captured and put into the actual recycling where it should be. This one would need more consideration as to whether this went to all householders in the district or whether it just went to those that have an individual bin, because we've obviously got some have 1,100 shared communal bins, and it's whether we'd want them sitting for 3 weeks, and it's whether we would just treat those differently. This would also need to be considered alongside potentially food waste services or a nappy collection service or reuse nappy schemes, or to try and get the potentially smelly items out of the bins to try and get the path of least resistance. Again, those we haven't actually considered in this proposal, and it will be more detailed costings and more detailed information on those if it's a proposal to take forward. Some councils have successfully introduced 3 weekly, and those are the top performing ones. So the Isle of Anglesey in Wales has currently got 69.9% recycling rate, and they have now got 3 weekly. Conway Council has got 64.9%, and Bury Council in England, which was one of the first to introduce it, has got 52%. The councils have also indicated that this hasn't actually, well, some of the councils, I can't say definitely all of them, but have indicated that this hasn't increased fly tipping or street litter. So that's something that can be considered as well. The other option we've put forward are the curbside collection of textiles, small electricals and battery collections. It is likely that these would obviously have a much smaller tonnage in recycling that would be captured compared to the other options above. So it is less likely to increase the recycling rate significantly, but it is maybe a proposal that could be put in combination. Some of the high performance authorities do have these services. Another proposal which would actually be alongside anything that we introduce. So any of the ones above, if we introduce them, it would be very important to have a consistent and a simple communication campaign, because you need to give the residents as much information as possible and for it to be easily accessible for them and to show them what the new services are. And it's also linked to that, we can include elements of behavioural change. So the behavioural insight approach is a new method that the recycling team has been thinking about and that we have been undertaking. This is a way that we can try to nudge the residents to actually do the right thing and try and find the barriers and try and find different components within their everyday life where we can get the message across more. This can help behaviour for recycling or reducing the waste become a lot more automatic and hopefully make it become a lot more habitual, so it becomes sustainable and it becomes kind of their way of life and not an additional burden on their everyday things that they're doing. The recycling team, so that's us, we have carried out a project in Sprowston, which I know we have presented to the panel before we introduced it. And we have learnt some key things from that, which we can be taken forward, and this can be adapted. And I know Nagini is going to talk about this as a point later on the agenda. But this can be adapted, and it could also be used for the behavioural change for the food waste, can be used for the garden waste, it can be used for waste minimisation and trying to get those messages out there. If we do any key service expansions, it would be good to have very simple and clear messages. And there's also the potential of looking at other methods that we haven't used before. For example, East Riding, they actually have a text message service, which is just to remind residents to place their bin out. And they're actually the top recycling authority at the moment. So that's other ways just to do the nudge technique and get the message across. We've also put on there a nappy scheme. So that could be either the promotion of reusable nappies, which I know we had many, many years ago through Norfolk County Council, or the introduction of a nappy service. And that's linked to if we did do the 3 weekly collections for residual bins, that might be something we want to consider a bit more to get the nappies out the stream. Again, that is something we haven't actually placed in the proposals, the costing of how that would work, but that is something we could look at a later date. So that's the summary, which is a very long summary. So for the next steps, we've got, it's either, well, it's obviously, we'll go with the panel, and it's you either take no further action, and if we decide not to take any of the proposals, it's very unlikely that the 60% will be reached within the time scale set within the strategy. But what we would like is for the panel to present options to take forward, and then for us to then develop it into a more detailed report. And once we've done this, this can allow us as the team to actually approach the high achieving authorities again to try and get more information and more detailed things and feedback, potentially how the garden waste has been going if they've now started to charge for it again. And we can also, once we know the direction, consult with other potential partners, and that can be the Norfolk Waste Partnership, the Keep Britain Tidy. It can also be the Waste Resource Action Programme and also the Broadland Youth Advisory Board. And we can try and engage with as many people as we can to try and get the message and help. So we have got considerations, just need to be given that obviously there is large financial implications for some of this, and it's weighing up against the financial implications about the desire to reach the 60% recycling and how much of it needs to go forward. And it's also the time frame, because obviously within a 5-year plan, it is potentially a large financial burden that will be placed at once rather than a staged approach. And the other thing obviously is to consider that we're obviously in the middle of a pandemic. So our work is largely based on community engagement and getting the message out there, going out and looking at recycling bins and actually engaging with residents on the doorstep a lot more. But at the moment that we're not allowed to go out, so that isn't plausible, and we don't know what future lockdowns there'll be as well. So there you go.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And so I'll throw it open for questions. And I see Ken Kelly is here wanting to ask about bin sizes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, good evening, Michaela.
Hello.
I'd like to throw a touch of realism to all of this as a resident, and somebody who is environmentally really aware. We've got everything going in this household, and there's only 2 of us plus 1 cat, and she doesn't make a lot of mess. We find that the way that we're going, 2 weeks, our green bin for collection is full. So what my worry is the fact is, if we go to 3 weeks, how are we going to manage for the rest of a whole load of residents who aren't as good as us for recycling? You're also talking about going from 240 litres to 160 and then collecting them every 3 weeks. It's not possible to do both. So I'm just telling you how we are is a very environmentally aware household about the problems we would have if we go to some of these. And I know there's a lot of work gone in. You talk about the high achieving councils that you've gone to, Anglesey and Conway. I've lived in both places and they're totally different from us, and how they can do it is easy because of their locations and how they operate. So it's not something that is a guideline that we can follow, because they are totally, absolutely different from what Broadland is. We haven't looked for the 3 weekly. I'm at a loss of how we're going to do the different bins, the 3 weekly, and try and get all this together. I'm just at a loss how you're going to manage it. At the moment as well, householders have totally changed their way they carry on with shopping and all the rest of it. I mean, we're the same. If you look at the amount of cardboard that comes in this house this month, it is phenomenal, because the way that we've got lockdown, and we could be at this for another 6 months still, and we're looking like that. So really, we need to be looking at cardboard, because the way that people are now going to carry on shopping and the rest of it, we're going to have monumental amounts of cardboard. I pass it to you for comment, please.
Yes, would you like to comment, Michaela?
Yeah, I didn't know the process then, what to do. I'd just like, they're all really good points, and a lot of residents, I'm sure, will have a lot of the same questions, and that is something we will look forward to more and go through when we do detailed responses. The bins, the reduction of the bin size is actually to a 180 litre bin, so I think you said 160. So I know that's not much difference, but that is the reduction to the size. And the proposals are also either for a 3 weekly collection or a 180 bin. So it wouldn't be the both. We wouldn't reduce the size, well, unless you guys told us to, obviously, but we wouldn't think of reducing the size of the bin and then spreading out the collection time as well. As a householder of two, have you got the normal, if you've got the normal standard 240 litre bin, it's really just kind of look at what you're throwing away, and then we can look at waste minimisation techniques. And again, that is something that we would like to present across with any service changes, to try and get those behavioural changes done and actually look at what you're throwing away and whether there's any waste minimisation that you can do. And the other point I think you had was about the cardboard, and that has been shown, there has been research done by the Waste Resource Action Programme, and there has been other national trends to show that during lockdown, it was food waste and cardboard, and I think glass as well. They did all show increased rates of tonnage. And it is, as you said, a lot of people have changed their way of shopping, and it is all the Amazon orders and every other type of delivery at the moment. But that wouldn't come into the residual waste reduction. That would be a part of the recycling collection, and increased recycling we would obviously go for and we would promote. And we do collect, we do have larger size recycling bins for householders that want it. And it is also the other possibility is if you do have it, you can put out excess recycling, providing obviously the weather's suitable and the cardboard is kind of contained and it is dry, so it's not blowing about everywhere and wet. So that is something, that is maybe another way we need to look forward, in that the recycling behaviours will change, the patterns will change, and that's something maybe as the recycling team as well, we need to look at, and how the new situation is developing.
Yeah, thank you, Michaela. My main premise is, if we change drastically, and we really want to be doing that, it's going to be quite a hard sell for a vast majority of residents. And it's going to take a lot of communications, as you say, for us to achieve anything like 60%. Thank you.
Just before I go to the next question, could you just answer a question, or if you can't, I'm sure Pete could. Can we have different size bins being collected by the same lorry? Because we've got our standard bins. Some residents have larger bins, and then if we had some smaller bins, does it cause any problem with the lorries?
I think Pete can jump in if I'm completely wrong, but I think it's more about the height of the bin. So I know we had some bins that were 120 litres, but they were a little bit shorter in height. And I think that posed more of a problem for collection. But we now have 360 litre bins and 240 litre bins, and they're collected fine. So have I got that right, Pete? It's more about the height?
Yes, just to confirm, Chair, that Michaela is correct, that we can empty 360, 240 and 180 litre bins on the same vehicle.
Right, so a partial introduction could be done. Anyway, moving to John Fisher, please, next. And then after that, I've got Karen. Oh, and John Ward, right. So John Fisher.
Councillor Fisher, you're muted.
Are you with us, John?
I am. I couldn't. Am I with you now?
Yes.
Couldn't.
Yes.
I'm trying to introduce two screens, which I shouldn't be doing. I'm not technical enough. So I lost my microphone icon. No, I was really surprised to hear what Ken said. The fact he's filling up his green bin in 2 weeks of waste, because I really can't believe two people and a cat produce that much waste.
We do, honestly, John.
In which case, Ken, you got it wrong. Because
no, I haven't. We're a normal household.
There's two people and a dog in my house, and we have one tiny plastic bag in our green bin every fortnight. It's, you know, so really, I'm a big supporter of 3 weekly collections. The difficulty behind that is the politics of it. But the evidence is there. It does reduce waste. It does increase recycling. And from that point of view, you know, it's to my mind, it's the obvious move. And anyone who can't manage a 240 litre bin, even a 180, with waste rubbish over a 3 week period, they need educating, which I know Michaela will she'll soon educate anybody on how to reduce their waste. So that's one thing. But looking at some of the other suggestions, I certainly think that the idea of a text messaging service, I've no idea how much that would cost. There's no figures on that. But I think people these days, they do respond to texts. It's more and more of a system of telling people what to do. And if we're trying to increase our food waste take up, certainly I think that could be something that was introduced and increased that. Regarding garden waste, we cannot possibly, I think, even look at giving a free garden waste service unless we're forced to. And I really don't think the government consultation will even come down on the side of that, because there'll be so many councils in financial difficulty if they do. So garden waste, yes. What I do think we have to do is look at our dry recycling, and when we're looking at Norwich and South Norfolk with their figures, is it because we're producing more waste within Broadland and therefore the percentage is lower, or is it the fact that we do need to educate and with a signed up, but we need to educate Ken? Do we need to educate? do we need to educate our residents in better ways of recycling? Because when you think that really our figures of putting us the top in the council on recycling are dependent on organic waste. I know we've got our food waste, which is part of the organic figures, but and Norwich had food waste through the King's Lynn. But I think we need to look at the figures on our dry recycling and see what we can do as a campaign, as a nudge. It's amazing how many people do respond to nudge messages coming through. The other thing is I do travel the country a bit, not so much now I've lost my license, but down at Bristol, I think I said before, they have to discourage people from putting food waste in their normal bin, because they have 100% food waste collection in Bristol and Clifton, and they have yellow tape that they put around the bin which says please don't, which is the waste bin, which says, or the recycling, please don't feed me, because people have been putting obviously food waste in the waste bins and the recycling bins, which we know happen here, and it sticks. Obviously, it's tape goes around the bin. Please don't feed me food, and all of your neighbours then see it because it stays on there for a number of weeks, and obviously then reminds you every week not to put food waste in and encourage the food waste. And on that, I've got lots of other things I could say, but I won't say any more just at this time. Thanks.
Right. Thank you, John. Karen, next, please. Or did you want to come back on anything John said, Michaela?
I'll just mention, sorry, I was just going to mention that on the discouraging the food waste, we did put stickers on some of our bins through the RAP funded trial. So we did put, they were big red stickers that said keep food waste out of this bin, I think. So we have got that in some parts of the district. So we have done that, but yes. And yeah, there you go. I just wanted to say that one.
Thank you. Karen, next, please.
Thanks. Just I suppose a couple of kind of questions in terms of the contamination and targeting the contamination. From it's I'm assuming it's kind of nappies and food waste being the biggest targets. Is there any way that you're able to have a sort of and I suppose this goes for just beyond sort of targeting the biggest contaminants, but the strategy going forward, is it any possible to kind of spatially differentiate that so that you actually look at kind of where we've got sort of concentrations in certain towns, sort of rather than and actually that's we put a slightly differentiated strategy out. I know it's a little bit more nuanced and it might take a little bit more communication, but then you've got sort of, I suppose, something that understands, appreciates there's a difference between perhaps those that are in towns and kind of rather than sort of really rural area, part of the more rural areas in the district. So just that sense, and whether we've got a sense of the kind of contamination, you know, if that's sort of nappies, and if that is the case, I'd really like to see sort of that being costed out a little bit more in terms of a collection for nappies. That we, in terms of work or not, yeah. So those were my kind of question really, in terms of sort of if you'd like to comment, that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I missed the end of it because I don't know if you froze or whether it's just me, but it dropped out a bit. But I think I've got the main points.
I'm sure Karen will come back if you miss anything.
Yeah, I'll go through, and if I miss anything, yeah, just say. So for the contamination in Broadland, we have done a large amount of work on the contamination, and we have gone through, we have MRF audits, and each round is audited at the MRF. So they are only kind of snapshots because it's just a sample within 3 240 wheelie bins. But that has enabled us before to try and highlight kind of priority areas that we can target. So it didn't happen last year, but the year before and the year before that, however long ago that was, we did employ students over the summer period, and that helped us to target these areas, and it helped us to kind of pinpoint and do a lot of work with a lot of houses. And so that is very resource intensive when you go down to that level. So that is why we did need the additional students. So we had, I can't remember how many rounds and properties we went. I think that it was thousands of properties, but to do it properly, we kind of went to a house, you do the checks of the bins, then you go back 2 weeks later, and then you go back 2 weeks later, and we kept going back until we'd actually turned that bin around. So some areas you might be there for 2 or 3 months to try and get it done, but it was a leveled approach where you write a letter to people. So for example, you said the nappies, you'd say nappies can't go in, and then you'd give other options for what the nappies can be. And then that kept going to the stage where if they really weren't doing them, so I know we went to one bin and there was food waste in it, and it had got to the stage where it had been in there for 6 to 8 weeks and it was starting to go mouldy and grow maggots. So it got to a stage where we were, if you're not using your recycling bin, let's consider removing it or try and find those type of problems. So we can identify hotspots, and that's also using the local knowledge of the collection crew. We can identify them. But if you're doing it on an individual bin basis, it's very resource intensive, and it's also very restricted to the summer period because you need to get to the bins before the collection vehicles. So obviously the collection vehicles start at 7 o'clock in the morning. So you need to be there at 6 o'clock, which you can't do because you'd need a head torch on, and then people would just think you're up to something, being very suspicious. The other bit of work that we have started concentrating on is communal bins. So those are the shared bins, which are hotspots, if you like, in their own right, because people don't like to take ownership of them. And then it's working with the housing associations and the private landlords, and it's again trying to get that behavioural change again to try and get people to take ownership of the bins. Or we've been changing communal bins from large bin to smaller shared bins, and then actually starting to put property numbers on them so we can do targeted letters and try and do it that way. So that's if, obviously at the moment, we can't do that type of work anyway, because we can't do on the ground monitoring and we can't engage with residents at that level. So I know the other bit you mentioned was a communication campaign. I think that was when it started to drop out. But I think you mentioned the communication campaign and if that could be more targeted. So that is something that we can do through the collection crew. We can ask them to just target a certain parish or a certain estate, because I know before that they have actually shown us and said new estates are actually high contamination areas for polystyrene. And I guess that's a lot of people are moving in, buying new equipment and getting polystyrene. So we can look at doing targeted communication, and we could also obviously work with comms. And if we looking at different age demographics, and we can maybe do targeted Facebook and that type of communication campaign as well as social media. So I don't know if that answered everything, because I did miss some, but.
Okay, you're right, Karen. So we'll move on to John Ward, please.
Thank you. Yeah, so my green residual waste bin is only a third full at the end of 2 weeks, and that was 2 adults and a dog. And we put bagged dog waste in there as well, and it doesn't smell after 2 weeks. I don't see what the problem is with people's nappies going in there for 3 weeks. I think we could easily do 3 weekly collections. But if the decision was to keep with 2 weekly, then I think we should slowly try and change the bins to the smaller size, but not do them all at once. Just do new bins for new estates, etc., and any exchange bins to the smaller ones. I think it's very important that we get this 30% of people that are not using food waste to use food waste, and not just the odd campaign. I think it needs to be every week, week after week, and the actual bin men to put stickers on the green bins, like Councillor Fisher mentioned. Actually, I don't think we should be promoting composting, because that just damages our figures, doesn't it? I know composting is quite a good thing to do, but not from our point of view. If we want to get more recycled waste, and I don't think we should have free garden bins and free garden waste collection unless that is dictated by the government. And there's just one thing, Michaela, you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation I was going to ask you about. You mentioned curbside sorting, what exactly did you mean by that, please?
that is the government, they've noticed that the quality of recycling material isn't perhaps as high as what they want. I can't remember what legislation it is, so if any, or plan, so if anyone wants to jump in, as in Victoria or Nagin, feel free. But it is to get the high quality of material. So I know many years ago we had to do TEEP document, and so that was, you can do commingled collections, especially with glass, providing that you can prove, I think it's technologically, environmentally and economically practical. So every council had to do their own TEEP document. But I think following that, there's maybe some recognition that people are doing commingled with glass under TEEP, but it's not actually getting the high quality of material. And I'm afraid I can't remember what that came
It's
from.
in the resources and waste strategy and the consultation on consistency.
So you're really talking about extracting glass, are you, and keeping
Or
glass separate?
sorting it at the curbside, so having a different container.
Yeah, so that is one of the consultations that will come in next year. So it's not been implemented as yet. It's something to be considered, but again, that could be glass banks. So it doesn't necessarily maybe have to be at curbside. It could be the reintroduction of glass banks or something like that. Yeah. So that is just something to consider as well.
And the point about glass is that you can sort of recycle 99.9% of it virtually, can't you? So yeah, it's worth on the bigger picture, certainly. Right.
Thank you.
And Adrian, next.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of things really. In terms of the size of the bins, I sort of share a lot of what people are saying there, that my green bin is a lot less full than the recycling bin. So I think the idea of smaller bins is an encouragement to people. And I think, as John Ward just said, I think the idea of replacing for new residents or for replacement bins with smaller bins would be a way of moving across to that, because replacing them all en masse would seem a waste of the existing bins, and then what do? Put them into landfill or something, which defeats the object. So I like the idea of smaller bins on a rolled out basis for new and replacements. I think the tech service is an excellent idea. Again, depending on the time of year, you can promote different services, encourage people to do certain things, as you say, to remind people just to put the bins out. And then in terms of the garden waste, again, I don't necessarily agree with going to a free service, but I just wonder, is there a way of looking at some encouragement for people to take a brown bin by having a taster period or something where you get the first 6 months a free, no direct debit for first 6 months to see how you go with it, and then you can return it if you're not using it. Just something to encourage people to take it out who may be on the don't I need one, just as a thought to encourage more people to take up brown bin. Thank you.
Can I just come in on that point, Councillor Crotch? I think that's a really good idea, actually. It's something we could potentially look at in terms of potentially ask people to pay for the first 6 months and they get the second 6 months in the year for free on the brown bin. Just to go into that query about the government's sort of ambition to have free garden waste collections. So this is something that's potential in the Environment Bill that's going through Parliament at the moment, but also in the Resources and Waste Strategy in 2018. Within those strategies, although we don't have much detail, there is a commitment from government to cover any new burdens funding that would be felt by local authorities. And as Kyla said, then that's something that they'll be going out to consultation on over the next couple of years. But what we don't know is what that new burdens funding could look like. But it is something that we need to consider as we go forward if they are going to implement free garden waste collections.
Right, thank you for that. Grant, you just put a comment there. Do you wish to add anything to it?
Yeah, no, I don't. Sorry, excuse me. To me, it's a bit of a conundrum with regards to the 3 weeks, 3 weekly collection versus 2 weekly collection, and changing the size of the bins, because I certainly agree with what John was saying about this. The amount of green of the green bin content certainly has reduced. But what what I'm wondering is if you reduce the size of the bin, you are in fact then going to encourage people to recycle correctly. In other words, the grey bin will then become fuller because they'll be putting stuff that they sometimes put in the green bin correctly now into the grey bin. So that to me would work. But then the green bin would need to be collected on a 2-weekly basis. If you have the current green bin being collected on a 3-weekly basis, then I would suspect that it might have that same effect, but then the bin size remains the same. So if you were going to have a sort of like a pilot introduction of having a smaller green bin, then it should stay on the 2-weekly basis, and you find that works, that the recycling rate is increased, then you would want to go back to you would then want to go onto a 3-weekly basis, but then you need to increase the capacity of the green bin. What I was initially saying in my comment was, what happens if you actually forget to put your green bin out? To have your green bin sitting in the property with all the residual waste in it, for having it there for 6 weeks before it's collected, to me that would be a bit of a health hazard. So I would have a bit of a concern about that. Just going on to the free brown bin, because I don't avail myself of a brown bin because of the cost. But if you were to have a free brown bin you pay for 6 months and then you have it 6 months free. My concern would be which of those 6 months is going to be the season that you actually do a lot of gardening. And in other words, you have it sitting around for 6 months that it's not really used because you don't really do much gardening in a period of 6 months of the year anyway. So those are just some of my thoughts.
You're obviously not a gardener, Grant. Can we move on to Trudy, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just really on the leaflet thing, it seems like they're very effective. And I know you said Canty paid for them before, but going on the results you gave with promoting the brown bins, I would have thought that actually the leaflet would pay for itself almost anyway with the uptake from the brown bins. But thinking on the free 6 months, I guess the obvious time to do that would be in the summer when it's used the most, so people realise just how useful they actually are. So yeah, I think if the leafleting is successful, then I don't see why we wouldn't pay for that. And again, with regards to the residual waste, yeah, I've 2 people and a dog, my bin is nearly empty every time.
Thank you, Trudy. Right, David, did you want to say anything, or is it just an observation?
Yeah, I would. Brown bins, there are a lot of people in Helston who actually would like a brown bin, but actually have nowhere to store it. That might sound a bit strange, but they actually physically don't have a lot of space to put a brown bin. That's one thing. I do tend to find that the smaller bins, because we've got some smaller bins on Sadler Road, and they are actually the ones that blow over and all the rubbish goes down the road. And that is a big problem. I think the footprint, they're just basically very small at the bottom. They're the same height, but they actually fall out. They blow over, lid comes off, and then it just spins round in the wind and everything's gone. And it's not particularly nice if you're at the end of the road where it catches it, unfortunately. The other thing I was going to say is, I don't actually get the thing about the green bin is, yes, we've actually got a family of 5 and we don't fully use our green bin, but I'm not actually seeing why you need to change it, because perhaps it's just more of an education for the people who still fill it up rather than actually need to change it. Are you penalised? Because there are, I'll hold a hand up, sometimes there are, but it is things like polystyrene when you buy a new TV, where you just get so much polystyrene and things that you just can't the bin is not actually full enough. Then you just got, it just fills because it's full of air and everything. That's, I think it's a bit stupid to actually expect. I know there might be one-off occasions, but they do happen on a sort of like a regular basis. But as I said, generally our bin is actually, green bin is empty. It's a lot less than it used to be. It is upsetting. We are cardboard people, because I have 3 daughters and they use Amazon like as if it's, you buy something at Sunday morning and you get it delivered Sunday afternoon. So you get loads of cardboard, but unless you're really clever and lucky, and I've never seen a weather forecast that's much cop, to be perfectly honest, and you have the problem that you put your cardboard out, there's a little downpour, minor, and then when you come home you've got tons of cardboard still and a sodden wet. The bit, I don't know how we actually cater for that. And then when you actually say, well, yeah, it looked like it was raining, but it didn't rain in our area and the cardboard's still there because it hasn't been taken. So the residual cardboard collection, we need to do something. If you really want to make your recycling rates better, is to actually look at that, because I can only see cardboard on Amazon and such like being increasing. That's all.
Right. Thank you.
I'm happy to comment.
Yes.
For the brown bins, they're limited space. That is a good point, that you obviously need a collection point. So that is, I don't think we've ever considered smaller bins for brown garden waste collections, but it is, you can actually, well, depending on how well you get on with your neighbour, you can always share a brown bin. So providing someone is happy to do the payment and you trust them, there is that point. I guess we could also look at collection points and that type of thing to try and maximise the brown bin usage. For the bins blown over, I don't know the dimensions and specifications of the bin, so I'll let Pete jump in if needed, if he knows any more. But I know that is a problem. I've got a 240 recycling bin, and it is, you just often see it blown about if you kind of look at the weather in the morning and just say, oh no, today's the day we're going to be collecting all the rubbish off our road and putting the recycling back in the bin. And so unfortunately, I think that may happen with quite a lot of bins as well, especially the recycling bins. For the cardboard excess, I think that is maybe a material stream that it would be good for us to actually look at and develop more and try and give more consideration to. That is a point that I hadn't noted. Well, I kind of noticed but not considered, that the changes of shopping behaviour with the pandemic and more people being at home, we are obviously going to get a lot more cardboard. So we do normally say you can put out excess recycling, but especially at this time of the weather, the cardboard can't really be wet. Because that shrinks the length of the fibres, which then reduces its quality. So they don't actually then want it for recycling. So that is an area that maybe we do need to look forward to and develop. The other thing you mentioned is the green bin. We've got lots of obviously different types of residents in our district. And although some people will only put out half a green bin, we do get a lot of them that are actually overflowing. And it's those and communal bins and other types that would be a good point to target in communication campaigns, as you said, but also the reduction in the residual waste bin, that's more of a bit of a behavioural change as well. So it's kind of a very big nudge, if you like, or a bit more of a kick, rather, but to try and get the people that aren't doing it correctly at the moment to do it. So obviously you're recycling correctly at the moment, so well, not just at the moment, recycling correctly and using the bins, but it's more for the people that aren't doing it. It's a way of encouraging them to get the recycling actually out of the residual bin and recycling it where it should be.
Right, thank you. Who's next? I think the rest was Sue. Did you want to say anything in support of your suggestion about the 25% discount on council tax?
Oh, thank you, Chair. No, that was just a thought that popped into my head, that if you're paying 25% less council tax, it's because, and if it's because you're a single adult in a household, then maybe you could make do with smaller bins, and that would be a start on the process, and people perhaps wouldn't see that as a penalty. It just would go with the fact that they were paying less council tax, perhaps.
Right, thank you. I think Karen, you want to say something? Karen, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Sorry, my internet is terrible at the moment. I'm supposed to have fibre, for goodness sake. I think I've got gremlins jumping on it at the moment. I think I would be quite concerned if there was, I'd like to see smaller bins come in as an option. However, and part of motion, I think, yeah, especially people that are vulnerable, that have a medical condition, they use a lot of rubbish. So, you know, I'd like to see that, yeah, so there remains an option to buy into it, rather than it goes out as a blanket change. Yeah, I don't think the payment for that is viable, to be honest. Yeah, so those were the kind of comment I just wanted to make in terms of just differentiating, having that as an option. In terms of an either or, make it a 3-week change. Unless I've actually seen the figures comparing or contrasting the two, they shouldn't happen in parallel, but my understanding is it's an option for either or, either small bins or 3 weekly, not something combined. Right. Correct me if that is it. Either or, yeah.
Councillor
Good. Karen, I'm not sure how well we're hearing you. I'm just wondering if you'd like to pop your key points in the chat so we don't lose them. Yeah, fair enough.
Councillor Lawrence, it might be easier to hear you if you turn off your video.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good suggestion. Yeah, I'll put them in the chat anyway. But yeah, that was I would like to see a kind of, it's difficult to see what difference that makes on the figures and what change. And I don't know if that's possible to do the two options when you're asking us to kind of, what would you, you know, in your next steps, is it possible to do that analysis so that we can actually just see the, compare the two scenarios and what percentage of the people need to change over to smaller bins to make a difference? That would be the kind of a good point to understand.
Right. Fine. Okay. I think we've got all those. Anything you want clarification on, Michaela?
No, I think I've got the main points. I think you mentioned medical bins as well. I think I caught that part as well. And we do have a clinical waste service as well. So if there was a medical need, they could have a medical bin as well. The 3-week versus the reduction of the residual bin, that is, we could look into the figures if that is something that comes out of this panel. I'm trying to think how to do it, and I'm guessing I could look at waste data flow stats to try and look at the high achieving authorities and to try and look at the stats before the change was implemented and after implemented to see that way, and we can discuss with the higher achieving authorities. So yeah, we can look at it.
Right, fine. Yes, but just before we go to Ken Kelly, there's a couple of things I just want to share with you, and I want to see if I can share my screen. So if you bear with me for a second. And this, if you can still hear me, can you see this?
No, we can't see your screen.
Ah, right. Well, we won't bother to do it then.
Sorry, Judy.
No, it's worth a go.
Oh, yeah.
Share screen, just share screen.
Which is what I did. Oh, hang on. Hang on. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. What this was sent to me by a friend in Fife who has 3 weekly collections. But I thought if you just sort of scan it very quickly, it's all quite complicated. And I thought that would be quite, if we went to something like that, it could in fact be quite a challenge for our residents to to actually transfer from a fairly straightforward system to one of these. And if you just bear with me a moment, and in Wales, which is Flintshire, so where I think they didn't seem that different to Broadland, but Ken may dispute that. And these are just what they had to pre-sort. But again, it's the storage issue again, which I think is a problem. All right, just thought I'd share that with you. Right, Ken.
Yes, Michaela. I was thinking, we've come up with quite a few options in the rest of it. And, to resolve something, do we have enough time to carry out, say, a trial of quite a sizable district, say, with lower capacity bins or with 3 weekly collections? Is it possible to do that and then get the analysis of how the reactions from the residents are, but actually how it works? I think probably some of our guys for the refuse bit, like Pete and Victoria and them, could answer that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it is a good point, and I think the key bit to all of this is the aspiration of meeting the 60% by 2025. So it's how set in stone that aspiration within the strategy is, and that's the bit that will determine how long we've got to do trials, how long we've got to do like the investigating work, and then how much the budget and everything is that you want to put forward straight away. So I think that's the balance that the panel needs to kind of come up with, is if you want us to do the trials and going back and trying to evolve things slowly, or whether we want to put it all in at once to meet the 2025. So I'll let Pete answer if he's got anything else to say, or anyone else.
Yes, thank you, Michaela, and thanks, Councillor Kelly, for your question. I mean, in terms of a discrete trial, I'm sure we could arrange it, but we'd need to speak to our contractor. And of course, anything's possible, but it comes at a price. And I'm afraid we don't have that detail at the moment. But I think it's a good idea. But I agree with Kyla. Sorry, I just muted myself there. Sorry. I've lost my thread now, but I think it's a question. Yes, I think I was just agreeing with Michaela that it's a question of, how quickly do we want to proceed towards our, 60% recycling target?
Yeah, right. I think we've spent quite a long time on this, and I just want to capture 1 or 2 points, and then we'll conclude with what we'd like more information on. A question which can be taken offline. I just wondered about staffing, but I think that would be better if I left that. I'm just quickly going down my list. I quite like the idea of being able to do some one-off collections about electrical. I'm not so sure about textiles, but I'd quite like a bit more about how we can do some of those. I'd also like to know the feasibility of not only increasing the use of food waste from the areas where we currently collect, as to whether or not how practical that would be to extend that to some of our market towns. I think I quite accept that it's rather impractical to do very rural areas, but I wondered if there were a concentration of residents where perhaps that could be done. I think we can do a lot more about publicity, and I think we haven't done much recently, and I think that's been compounded by the Norfolk Waste Partnership, which has seemed to be in a complete lull for at least 8 months, I think. And we also shot ourselves in the foot a bit with our Broadland news, because in there we had a couple of things, and which, if you followed the web link, it wouldn't work. We do, of course, offer a reduced rate for our brown bins for if you pay by direct debit, but there seems to be a problem with the finance that we can't set up a direct debit to start with, and so we could capture people, and if they've got a direct debit set up, you know, they sometimes just let that run with, whereas they might think twice about paying for it each year. And there's some good stuff also on norfolkrecycles.com, but I don't think we ever link with that or publicise that. I don't know if any of our websites link with that. They do?
We do, and that is actually the Norfolk Waste Partnership website. So we try and put on our website, we largely try and just stick with the operational stuff for Broadland, and then we link to that website for more information.
Because
so we do.
They were promoting reuse. All right, I know it's not quite the same as recycling, but they were promoting, you know, if you want to get rid of your sofa, who could you ring up for it? And it seems that that would be something good to actually encourage. Right, I think that's probably what I'm gone through my list. So we just need to conclude what we would like the next steps to be. And if I go through, it's certainly something on behaviour change, extension of food waste. Do just say if you disagree with any of this. The ability for some people to have smaller bins, text messaging to get the message out there. I'm not sure how big an exercise that would be to actually collect people's mobile phone numbers, but I'm sure it would be useful. Certainly communication, I think, is a great thing. I think we can certainly improve on communication by either leaflets or stickers on bins. And I'd be interested to hear what Nadine is going to tell us, because knowing the estate in Sproston, which is a new estate, whenever I go around there, I always think that the message on the top lid of the bin isn't particularly clear, i.e. you can't easily read it. Now, it might just be me, but I don't know what other people think of that. And I wondered if strategic stickers would be it, but I'll be interested to hear about the next item. Is there anything else you want to add to that list for more information, or have I missed some that people have said, Michaela?
No, I think I will obviously look at what everyone agrees with, so I don't think there's anything missed. I think the point again it is just how much we're willing to put forward to get to the 60%, because it is the bit that's not on it is the garden waste, and if we want to do more promotions on the garden waste or the trial of the 6 months to try and increase that, and the food waste increase in the capture rate.
I'm not sure what people think about you know, garden waste and having 6 months free. What existing customers think. Anybody got any comments on that? David? did you have your hand up?
On that, actually, I have to, my allotment's got actually 22 composters because I actually do separate everything. The whole idea, I still use a green bin because there's things like roots that you get from your cabbage and everything. The problem I have is actually there's not enough bins when the growing season's about. It's, I don't, for me, the carbon footprint of collecting the brown bin in the winter when you're not actually putting anything in it, because it seems a bit stupid. But there you go, that's my thoughts. There's times when your grass grow, because I don't tend to want to put grass in me composters, but at other times there's things I want to put in there. There's just, I know I can have 2 bins, but then I'm having 2 bins that sit there for several months of the year with nothing in, and that's actually needs to be more targeted, because you would get more green waste through your recycling and everything if you targeted the months that you provide the service. End of story for me.
All right, thank you. That I just would like to put an opposing view, is that we have a brown bin and ours is full all year round, but it depends what you have in your garden.
I've got 2 brown bins and a compost heap and a composter and a bloody great tree at the bottom of the garden that sheds its leaves. I have no trouble filling mine in. There's always something to go out, and a vine along the side of the house, so that I really depend on my brown bins. But I have one little polythene bag into my oh god, the green, the grey one, no, the green one. Yeah. So I can have a nice small one as a 25% reduction person, but perhaps I'll have a credit for the 2 brown bins I also have.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got a comment, if I may.
Yes.
About the brown bins. I was asked at one parish council meeting, why do I have to pay for my brown bin when at some other council they don't get charged for a brown bin? And the answer that I eventually was able to present to them was that in some cases it's included in your council tax. Is there not something that we could do in the way of having that cost included in the council tax, rather than, in other words, it's free and people perceive it to be free, but it's actually hidden inside your council tax bill?
I'm sure Trudy will give you an answer for that, and she's shaking her head. Right, okay. Thank you all very much for your comments on this. Can we now move on to item 5? Right, over to Nadine.
Okay, so this part is about the behavior change project that we brought to the panel in January. And in January, we were very excited. It was just about to start. So a quick recap from that presentation. The aim of the project was to reduce contamination on an estate in Sprowston by targeting indoor recycling behaviors. And that was through providing an indoor container to sort recycling into, providing weekly infographics to the residents, as well as an email newsletter that had games and prizes for residents to win. We started planning this in fall 2019 with monitoring and audits to gather data. And then at the end of February, with the help of Jump, we went door to door and conducted a questionnaire and got lots of great data from that, from residents. And then we did deliver the containers. We delivered, I think, 2 or 3 weeks worth of infographics and a few of the email newsletters. And then everything locked down quite quickly afterwards. So we weren't able to complete the project, and this is what this report is mainly around. We started strong and then coronavirus came and we weren't able to complete the project. So we haven't gained any quantitative results since nothing has really changed. We haven't been able to complete anything else because of the pandemic. Anything that we measure now will be compromised, as some other authorities have found. LARAC, sorry, one moment. The Local Authority Recycling Advisory Committee has found that the pandemic has changed behavior. They have seen recycling and waste behaviors change. So if we were to measure anything now, it would be we wouldn't be able to isolate those changed behaviors and attribute them to the project. So the proposals that we're bringing forward are really our next steps and what they should be. Moving forward from the project, we are thinking about how to communicate with the residents, what the original aims were, maybe through a letter. So all of the infographics are completed and they are on Norfolk Recycles. So we can link residents to that. We can complete the email newsletter with them, but beyond that, there's not much else we can do. In terms of replicating the project, this is point 4.3 in the report. We could look at replicating on the same estate or on a different estate. This would be quite a resource intensive option, not only for the team, but cost-wise. We designed this project for a specific context for this estate, and that's since changed out of our control. And so residents do have the container, but it's not a fresh new message anymore. And we have, as Kyla mentioned, we have learned a lot throughout this process, and we wouldn't want to do the same thing. We'd want to adapt it with our new learnings. And if we were to do something as personal, I guess, door to door, it wouldn't be second wave proof, if you like. So some other options for the future, we're looking at maybe online campaigns. So these infographics, they're digital. We have them all readily available to us. They're editable. So our comms team can do what they like with them. And an online campaign would ensure that we can keep the message going despite any other lockdown interruptions. As Kyla mentioned, there's a new food waste campaign being launched next week by RAP. And so that is something that we can tag on to and use nudges and the behavioral insights concept that we've learned through to minimizing food waste. And also the Norfolk Waste Partnership is kind of picking back up. So they're an important partner for us, looking at the website and the projects that they have coming down the pipeline. And then this is all in the context of the 60% target. So we are the team that we are, and our resources are the 2 part-time, 1 full-time team member. And depending on what work streams come with the 60% target, that will influence any behavior change projects that we want to pursue, but it can all be done in the shadow of the 60% goal. So if we are looking at rolling out food waste to market towns, what kind of communications campaign can target that behavior and really support residents in changing their behavior. That's a very quick overview. I didn't want to go on too long.
Yeah. And thank you for that. And what was the one thing you learned? Was the one thing you learned? I know it was an incomplete and all the rest of it, but
I think for me personally, that was the biggest learning, that we need contingency plans. If we can't deliver the infographics by hand, what could we do? If we had maybe had that contingency plan in mind, maybe we would get residents' emails in the questionnaire and then send them the infographics, or plan to put them on Norfolk Recycles and tell them at the doorstep, go to Norfolk Recycles. So I think contingency planning was my biggest takeaway, and secondary to that, maybe having a simpler nudge.
Right, thank you. And so do you feel that you should go back to those residents and finalise the project with them?
I think so, because we started quite strong. We were very invested. We had previously been monitoring the communal bins on the estate. So it feels unfinished, and even though the project can't go on in the same way, we still have the resources. So communicating to the residents in some way, I think, would be valuable for us, for them, and to share the information that we still haven't shared with them.
Right, and would there be one message you pushed for?
In the
letter.
In the letter. Probably we haven't thought about this yet, but the main aim of the campaign, which was to reduce contamination. So pushing that, because on the estate, there were some main contaminants that we were repeatedly finding. So repeating that message, since we haven't been able to go look at their bins, so we don't know if that's different now or not.
Yes, quite. Thank you for that. Comments, anyone? Oh, Karen, is that about this one or?
Yeah, so just to quickly recap, sorry, you would be aiming to close it with a letter, just a written communication to all the households, and in that, would it be at least telling them what the results of that initial survey were, so they don't feel as if they've just given you data and it's gone into the abyss? So that would be one point. And then that might be an opportunity if you can direct them then to signing up for a newsletter for continuation on this, and then you can get their emails if they go through and register for follow-ups, and that might be a way in which you can get a follow-up and get the email addresses that you might need. The other thing is it possible to get some sort of final benchmark? Not, obviously it's not going to be, but with those same households. So you've got a number of data set from that that was pre-COVID. When it actually stops, well, once we've got it, the other side of it, is it possible to do a benchmark with the same population, so that if there are any other campaigns, you just draw a line and say, look, this is where it was pre-COVID, this is where it is post-COVID, and anything else we do from beyond, if we sort of, look at, come back to them in, say, 5 years. And if in the letter you're explaining that potential with them, so that they can kind of, if you like, be a little bit of an opportunity to just pulse check with those kind of estates, new estates, or kind of estates as they emerge going forward. That will at least help us perhaps in the future, given the experience your team has had from the research. But given you've got limited resources, and within that resource limitation, or kind of, working with a university to try and help you get that data later, and look at ways in which you can get cheaper research rather than just a consultancy. That's sort of, have your comments on that would be quite helpful.
Thank you. I hadn't considered sharing some of the results of the questionnaire with them, and I really like that, and I think that's a nice way to kind of close the circle and give them some of their own results, because they live on that estate, and that'll give them more clarity on the people that they live around. And there's lots of good information in that questionnaire as well regarding perceptions, if they think recycling is good or bad or inconvenient or convenient. So thank you. The newsletter comment is also a good idea. One of the email newsletters that we had planned to send out, the last one, gave them the option to sign up to a newsletter that would keep going. But I think it's not everyone signed up to the newsletter initially. I think 69% did. So putting that in the letter is a good idea. And then the benchmark data, I think that's a really good long-term perspective, because we have this valuable information, and then after the dust maybe settles, and using students to get that information, I think is a good idea.
Right, thank you. Simon, you wish to comment?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just a comment really that partly relates back to the previous. I can't remember if my earphones are working actually. Sorry, it sounds funny to me. But can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So it relates back to the previous report and this report really, because obviously it's very disappointing that COVID came along and we weren't able to finish this report. But we are very stretched for resources, and I suppose in reality, and certainly when you were discussing the environmental strategy as well, it's the recognition that the resource within the recycling team to achieve 60% and do projects like this is very small. It's actually 1.2 FTEs. Nagine's here till the end of March, hopefully longer than that. But just for members to recognise that, you know, if you wish to achieve your 60% target or do projects like the one that Nagine has been through, and the benefits from that can be proven from examples of a similar project that was carried out in Norwich, and the very positive results around that, is that members at some point will need to consider the level of resource that is within the team to be able to deliver that. Now may not be the time to do that, but I thought I thought I would just raise that so the panel was aware.
I was saving that one, Simon, for our next conversation.
All right, fine. We'll pick that up next week then. Thank you.
And tell me, did you get any grant for the Nagine's exercise?
No,
there was no grant. No.
You did apply though.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you didn't get it. That's fine. Thank you. John Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, really, I really just to endorse a lot of what's been said. I think we have no option but to finish the project up. But how we finish the project, I think we can take a lot of advantages from that. If we circulate a newsletter, if we maybe put another survey out with it, and if we think there's an issue with the information on the bin lids, perhaps we should ask residents why they feel they didn't recycle quite as much as other people. We know it's a new estate. We know there's people moving in there from probably other parts of the country and other parts of Norfolk. If they're moving from other parts of Norfolk, then they shouldn't have had an issue because all of Norfolk recycle the same stuff. It might have been an issue with the colour of the bins because we know that varies. But I think we can finish this up in a good way and gather more information that we can then use in the future. And I think that's what we need to do. Explain to them we've had to finish it because of COVID, but then maybe trying to get more information, email addresses, this sort of thing.
And text and mobile phones, I mean.
Yeah, while we're going out to these residents, and the majority are going to be youngsters, and therefore finish it, but see if we can use it to an advantage. There was another couple of things that I made. Actually, when I think it was his name is, who's he gone? Simon. But if we're going to discuss resources later, then fine. But again, I know we have used students in the past, which benefit them because they get something on the CV, and we end up with fairly cheaper resources and labour. And I know that in fact the best form of data is actually collected face to face. It's labour intensive, it's expensive, but that we know gives us the best form of data. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Michaela, you'd like to come in?
I just wanted to say to Councillor Fisher, that was actually a really good point of kind of closing it up and giving them the data, but then at the same time asking for feedback from them as well, so we can ask them what they thought of the containers, what they thought of the infographics, and use it as a continual learning experience. So I just wanted to comment that I thought that was a really good idea.
Right.
I know it's in the report as well, but one reason that Sproulston was actually chosen was because it is also one collection round. So if we did want to get some post data on contamination, we can get it from the MRF as to whether the contamination rate has changed at all.
I think that would be really useful to get that data.
So that is, sorry.
No, that's comparatively easy to do, isn't it?
Yeah, so it is only a snapshot sample again, so it will only be from 3 bin sizes, but yes. So that was, and I also just wanted to point out with the students, we have used them in the past and they have been invaluable. So they have been brilliant for summer periods, but for the students, it is largely limited to the summer period when they're obviously not studying. And also in the current situation, we still need to consider how long the pandemic and COVID might go on and whether we can engage with people on the ground again and car sharing. And I just wanted to put that point in.
Yeah, right. Fine. Well, thank you. And the recommendations, we've noted the content of the report, and I think we've given you several ways in which we think the project can be closed.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, right.
I'll
well,
just make a comment, Judy, if you don't mind,
yeah,
please.
No, carry on.
Last year, Sue Pruitt and I were involved with the schools with, you know, about chewing gum and all the rest of it. And we went to the schools with, you know, a group, and they put on the show and the rest of it. And what I'd like to see is the involvement of the schools in Sproulston there, and what feedback you would get from the youngsters who, quite honestly, are the ones who motivate parents to actually really get a go of this. So I just wonder whether or not we're sort of having a name at them as well, which would assist.
Well, I'm not sure that I think schools at the moment have got quite a lot to cope with in the current environment, but
I'm just talking, you know, for the future bits where we go as well.
In the future, yes.
Yeah, not the present.
And again, that's why I'm quite keen to get the Youth Advisory Board involved at appropriate points as well. Right. So you have got enough for item 5, and so we now move on to item 6, which is the you again, Nadine.
Yes, item 6 is the consultation on the waste management plan for England. This was quite a learning curve for us, and as we've now realized, it's much more high level than us. But this consultation is it fulfills the requirement of the Waste Regulations 2011 for it to be reviewed every 6 years. This consultation doesn't propose any new policies. It's just a summary of existing policies. It is 3 questions, and we have put our proposed questions in the document. We have seen LARAC's response as well, and we have seen Norfolk County Council's response as well, which I'll talk about. So the contents of this plan are determined by the requirements of Schedule 1 to the waste regulations. As I said, it doesn't include anything new. It's just a combination of existing policies, and those existing policies are the ones that will impact us and will be consulted on next year. There are 3 that will be consulted on next year. The deadline to respond to this consultation is the 15th of October, which is next week. The first question is asking whether this, combined with location-specific guidance, will meet the requirements of Schedule 1, and we've answered yes. LARAC have answered yes, and County Council has answered yes. And the way that this form works is when you tick yes, it just takes you to the next question. You can't provide comments. Question 2 is asking about the environmental report, which asks about the environmental impact, the strategic environmental assessment, and it's asking whether we agree with the conclusions of the environmental report, and we have said yes, and that we aren't experts in that field. LARAC and Norfolk County Council have also responded yes. The third and final question is if we agree or disagree with the statement that there will be no additional burdens for businesses, consumers, and local authorities arising directly from the adoption of the plan which has no new policies. So we have said yes, because there are no new policies.
Please.
Norfolk County Council have said yes, there are no burdens. We agree. LARAC provided quite a detailed response, which I think was circulated yesterday because we got it quite last minute. And that provides feedback on the extended producer responsibility, the deposit return scheme, and consistency, which are 3 really key points that will be consulted on next year. So it's whether we can fit in some of LARAC's response in ours, or if the form is okay to just be ticked yes. I was speaking to Joel at Norfolk County Council, and he was saying how DEFRA views this as a tick box exercise because it's done every 6 years. And the consultations that will come next year when we can dig in and really give the feedback. So we just wanted to get your views on this.
So views, anyone? No one? So are we happy to go with the suggested responses? Yes, would you like to indicate by putting your hand up if you agree with going with the responses in the original paper?
Councillor Britcher, could you confirm either way, because we can't see you on your camera?
He may have had a comfort break.
Right. I think everybody else is in agreement. Ah, he's back. David, did you hear the question that we're voting on?
Unfortunately not. I had to go and deal to something in the house. A bit of an emergency happened. Sorry, I didn't. So I will abstain from the vote.
No, well, we're just agreeing to the consultation that was in our papers. The response to the, well, it's not really a consultation because there's no new policies or anything. But
yeah, I have read them, and yeah, everything. If we haven't actually changed anything, I'm in agreement. No problems.
Yep, fine. Thank you very much. Thank you for that. And we move swiftly on to item 7 and update on the waste procurement. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. I was expecting actually Sarah to be on the call, but she's obviously not dialed in, so I think I can cover it. Since your workshop, obviously, last Monday, we've been working with Eunomia to sort of agree the specification. Pete and his team are working on that almost every hour of the day. The main update, I suppose, is that we've got some soft market testing with the potential contractors on the 19th and 20th of October, and all 6 of the main contractors in the market have indicated that they're interested in participating in that. That's the sort of early discussions that we'll be having with them around obviously the objectives that we discussed last week and some other aspects. There were a couple of points actually that we failed to actually get clarity on last week at the workshop. If you don't mind me now just going through those.
And can I just say it is okay to do this in open session as we're being...
Yeah, I think so, yeah, because they're not, these are not confidential. These are just that in case we get asked by the contractors. We were assuming that the members would be happy with a contract length of 10 years plus 10 years. The existing or the original contract was 10 years. You could have a 7-year contract. Obviously, vehicles have a 7-year life, although now they're moved to 10 years.
10 years.
So if you're happy, then when we're in the soft market testing, we will say to the potential bidders that we're looking at a 10-year contract with a possible extension of up to 10 years. Sorry, these are up to 10 years. So obviously we're able to terminate the contract at an earlier date if necessary.
So are we all happy with 10 years?
That looks to be unanimous.
Yes, fine, thank you.
Right. And the
That
second point
question-
really is, sorry, Judy.
No, go on. Go on,
Yeah,
Simon.
and yeah, and the second point was really, again, just in case we get asked by a contractor or a potential bidder, what are members' feelings around whether they would consider a facility, a depot effectively, that wasn't within district that they could share? Say if we were looking for, say for example, if I said Biffa were to bid, and Biffa's obviously existing depot is not within Broadland, or Serco were to bid and they've got a depot both at, again, which isn't within district, or are members looking for a depot that has to be within district?
Comments, anyone? Ken?
Yeah, just on this, Simon, I mean, what we have to think about the routes if we're going to have it out of there, and the implications that would have for costings. You know, we wouldn't have the information to be able to do anything until, you know, that whoever comes up for the bidding and the rest of it can just say what the routes are. My worry is it's going to add cost to, if the, you know, that wherever they pick the depot, it's going to add big cost to, you know, the contract.
Yeah, I can understand in terms of route, but then the converse to that, of course, is there's no capital. There wouldn't be the capital cost of actually then having to do the work at the existing depot. So you win on one side, lose on the other.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Karen?
I think it should be an option. I think especially if it allows us to have more bidders in the pool. I think it's up to them to put the case on how much it would cost and what the routes would be, and that would be part of the bid. So as long as we're quite specific in terms of what's included in that bid, so that we understand, you know, what, and also in terms of kind of, you know, what the implications of that. We need to give as many companies as possible as the option. And as we know from, you know, there are savings made with shared depots and shared costing. So, you know, let's see if we can take advantage of that, even if it isn't necessarily shared within our district. So I would say give the option, but just be clear about the scope of, so that we get a full sense of what those costings and implications are within that package.
Any other comments?
Councillor Ward and Councillor Fisher.
Right. Councillor Ward first, please.
Yes, thank you. I certainly don't think it should be ruled out. I think most of the depots we're probably talking about are either in Norwich or very close by. So I don't see that it would be a problem to go out of the district.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd say I wouldn't at this stage rule anything out. And if the companies themselves want to still quote, they've got the costs to fix out within the contract as to whether the depot will offset the possible longer routes. The only thing is, it will leave us vulnerable after 10 years, for example, at the next contract. That then leaves us vulnerable because we don't have a depot. So whereas at the moment we're offering a depot and we were all 6 people interested, in 10 years time or 12 years time, if it's 10+2, the issue then becomes is the people who are providing, we then have to go out to anybody and they either have to provide a depot within the area, for example, or whoever has our contract, because they've got a local depot, they then have an advantage over potentially some of the other people who might quote. So it does leave us vulnerable, I think, for the next contract. But at this stage, I would suggest we take them on board and work with them.
Thank you.
Right, seems sensible to me. So I think the conclusion is there. Don't rule that out at the moment.
Fine, thank you. And then it was just another couple of minor points. I think there was a discussion, or certainly I discussed it with Councillor Leggett, about a visit to the existing depot, so that members can get an appreciation of the condition of the existing depot, and then the works that are required to bring the depot up to standard. It would be interesting to get an idea as to whether members are interested in that, and then we can speak to Veolia obviously about organising that. To be clear though, it's to look at the condition of the depot as opposed to obviously any of the operation of Veolia, because we're in the procurement process. And then linked to that as well is that I just heard yesterday that Veolia have secured next week, so it's very, very short notice, a trial for an electric refuse vehicle. So an electric vehicle will be on site next week, and they have offered, unfortunately they're very restricted on the time that they can offer us. They've offered us Wednesday morning if anybody would like to go, and or actually Wednesday, but if anybody would like to go and have a look at the vehicle. Somebody from Dennis Eagle will be there, so it may be possible to actually link the look at, you know, the visit to the depot and have a look around the depot as well as looking at the electric vehicle. It's really only there, we can only really see it on Wednesday, because on the other time they've got to have it out on the route and trialing it. Yeah. Although they did say that there may be a possibility that if members couldn't get to the depot, they may be able to take it via your ward, so maybe you could go out and have a look at it when it's actually in operation. But again, if we could just get an idea of anybody who's interested, possibly to go and have a look at it.
So who's interested? Who's interested in Wednesday? Right, Councillor Britcher, Councillor Prutton, Councillor Ward, Councillor Nerd and Councillor Fisher, and I am as well.
So how many is that? 6, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, I think they said they could accommodate 8 at one time. I think 8 they said was the maximum in one session. Right. They can do more than one session, but that should be fine. So what we'll do is I'll talk to Duncan tomorrow at Veolia and just confirm that, and then send you an email if that's okay. Yes, with the details.
That's fine. And do we then want to, for those people, to combine the depot visit, or do you want to arrange it separately?
I don't know. That's a question. Yeah, that's a question for you.
I went to the depot about a year ago. Had a guided tour, so I don't need one, thank you.
Right. It would be interesting. You might find it interesting to look at the things that we would be considering. We could possibly be considering changing.
Well, certainly, you know, if a visit's arranged, I'll happily go along, of course.
Right.
Thank you.
Anybody got any views on that, or no? We're not rushed with Adrian.
Sorry, can I just add that just in terms of depending on the time on Wednesday, which is why I didn't jump at it. It just depends on my work commitments. But if you could put me in the loop, and if it works with timings, then I'd be happy. Look forward to coming along.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, can I just come in there and say that having spoken to Veolia today, they're very flexible on timings, and that they would be happy to accommodate more than one group of visitors. So I think we could accommodate Adrian if needs be quite easily.
So yeah. Okay, right. So we can do that. Okay, and no one else is particularly interested in a tour of the depot.
Yeah, I would certainly like a tour of the depot, especially as we're going over there. It's be useful to do it at the same time.
I would, Judy, but I've got no means of getting there.
Well, I'm sure we could arrange to get you there. Right. Okay. Anybody? Well, are we limited to numbers in this COVID environment, and do we have to wear masks?
Certainly wear a mask.
I think you could choose to wear a mask yourselves. I don't think you'll actually have to wear one on site because it's a business environment, isn't it? But if you feel more comfortable wearing one, then I suggest you do wear one.
Right, and numbers.
The numbers, as Pete said, I think they're very flexible around the time. So what I will do with them is I will check with Duncan exactly how many he can take, and if we have to divide it into 2 groups, then sorry, we'll have to divide it into 2 groups because of the COVID issues. If not, hopefully we'll all get there together.
Yeah, sure. Right.
Thank you. That's all I had on the procurement update, really, around the procurement update.
Fine. So we'll move swiftly on to item 8, which is the future work programme. And what we have there is environmental protection and antisocial behaviour. We have activities for environmental strategy, and again, the opportunities to increase the recycling rates. I just would like to give you a swift update about the environmental strategy. But firstly, as we've got Nick Howard here, do you wish to say anything on either of those topics, Nick?
Very good, thank you very much. Evening, everybody. I've been quietly listening, but you didn't need to see my face in the background. I've been just working on the report while I'm with you. Just to thank you very much. To the next meeting, we'd like to bring an item on antisocial behaviour in particular. We're working up some close activity with police on antisocial behaviour and crime together. We think there are some new tactics we can bring forward, COVID permitting, in relation to antisocial behaviour. Antisocial behaviour, part of that will be about more complex cases, and there are some very challenging cases that we've experienced. So that's an item we'd like to bring to you specifically. And the second one for environmental strategy, having some close conversations with Simon Phelan and with Councillor Leggett, and just about how you might like to see us drive a work programme of actions on environmental strategy. And again, I think that would be a really helpful item to focus on at your next meeting, if that's okay.
Right. Thank you, Nick. And I'd just like to add, I've got an update from Phil Cote here about staffing for the environmental strategy, which, as you will recall, we were concerned about there wasn't sufficient resource committed to it. But we have a graduate apprentice starting on Monday, and for 6 months, she's going to work on scoping out the implementation of the environmental strategy. And the main objectives that Phil has said to her is the scope of the implementation of the strategy, including any associated budgets, resulting in a draft delivery plan, provide measures and baselines for targets and measures of success, and if possible, secure some early wins and ensure we have the associated communication strategy. And also, I'm told that there is a cabinet budget update report where there's a request in for 44,000 prorated for 2021 to help us deliver the environmental strategy. So, it does rather feel that at last we have got some movement on this, and we're going to see things happen. Councillor Nurden, did you want to say anything at this point about trees?
Well, I was just considering that it was possibly an issue that was raised at a parish council meeting that I attended by the coordinator of the tree wardens, and he was just concerned about the increase in the number of tree wardens in the district, and I forwarded the email on to yourself and Phil Courtier, and I believe it's in hand, but I believe that there was possible I don't know, things, the benefits or something that could arise from this
yes. Yes.
Interaction.
Yes, we have got a meeting planned, not until November, but that's to allow the graduate apprentice to be able to settle a bit into the new role. And we have got a meeting organised with the chairman of the tree wardens in Broadland. I'm not sure that's his correct title, but so hopefully there'll be some movement on that. And we also are going to take up an offer, I think, also to speak to the Woodland Trust. So again, a bit of movement on the environmental strategy. Right, anybody want to say anything else on the work programme? Is there anything else you'd like to see in there? Nick?
Councillor Leggett, just to say that we have seen an increase in fly tipping over the course of this year since the COVID lockdown, when of course it all went very quiet for a short time. In end of May and into June, we started to see an increase again. Through June, July, August, we saw 144 incidents of fly tipping. So I think that's calculates as an average about 3.5 per parish over the period. I'd like, if you're willing, to bring you an item on fly tipping, which is a bit of a situation report and a bit of a discussion about tactics and strategies for enforcement going forwards to the next meeting, if you are willing to receive it.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
I think we're happy to receive that.
Very much.
John?
Yes, well, as well as fly tipping, there's been a big increase in littering during this COVID period, I've noticed, especially in the parks. I don't know if it's something we should consider as perhaps some sort of campaign against littering.
Well, there is the Love Norfolk Hate Litter campaign, but that I think has stopped due to COVID. But perhaps we can have some figures, see if what the figures say about reports of littering. It depends if it's a Broadland. It's Broadland's responsibility to collect. There's 1-2 issues about that, so perhaps we can consider that one.
Councillor Leggett, I'll see what
we can bring back.
Yes, I'll see if I can bring you some figures next time that might be helpful. Of course, we don't have a major urban where you might have large-scale littering in one particular place and the opportunity to patrol and focus that activity. We've got a very large area, although we do have some hotspots. So we'll bring you some information on that. Certainly, we do carry out enforcement where we have a witness, because it's typically not a local authority officer that witnesses the littering offences. So I'll try and bring you that. It's something of a slightly different nature, so I'll do that as a separate piece to fly tipping.
Yep. Okay. Right, thank you. And just for your knowledge, the Broadland YAB are very keen to do a litter collection, and they're looking for suitable places.
Sorry, Chair, just to say at obviously the January meeting, it won't be the next one, we'll bring you obviously an update on the recycling initiatives, obviously in relation to the report that you discussed earlier.
Yeah.
And also by then I will probably be able to bring you an update on the MRF contract.
Yes.
All that work should have been completed by January, so we'll bring you a report on that.
January and update on. Right, fine. And obviously the waste procurement is a standing item. Yeah. Is it likely that we will be needing a special meeting at all for that, Simon, in the near future?
What, around the procurement?
Yeah.
I probably know more after the soft market testing in a couple of weeks' time. I don't think that you probably will actually know, because I think the next real decision point probably isn't until the new year.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Fine. Are we happy now to move on to item 9? Anything anybody wants to say? Anything else on the future budget items or? Right, okay. Item 9 is that I move that the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the remaining item of business, because otherwise information which is exempt information by virtue of paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as amended by the Local Government Access to Information Variation Order 2006, would be disclosed to them.